Head Hawk Power 17G in the mains and Head Lynx Tour Champagne 17G in the crosses, both at 48 pounds. Does switching my main and the cross string around make a difference? Well, you probably know when you're getting closer to something that suits your game when you start picking at least, let's say if you're stringing a hybrid, you start picking at least one string which kind of polarizes people. And I would say this Head Hawk Power maybe seems to be one of those strings where some people love it, some people hate it. So I'm not saying I've fallen in love with this, but I just did review having the Head Lynx Tour Champagne in the mains and the Head Hawk Power in the crosses. And what that gave me was I kind of did retain all the nice attributes of the Head Lynx Tour, the precision, the feel, the spin, and then it brought in what I felt was lacking was that bit of extra sort of nice power to the string bed without it suddenly becoming, you know, a different playing string setup. However, it still didn't quite give me everything. I think it's reasonable to say I'm probably not going to get everything. I'm going to have to sacrifice something. You can't have both this sort of, you know, not quite dead, but quite muted, solid feel that grabs the ball and say I want it to be lively and pinging off. I mean, those two things potentially don't go together, right? However, I kind of thought to myself, right now I've been sort of doing all the hybrids where I've got the Head Lynx Tour Champagne in the mains and then I'm changing out the crosses. And I thought, well, what if I took that exact same setup and switched it round and put the Head Hawk Power in the mains and the Lynx Tour in the crosses, which is exactly what I've done. I've retained it at exactly the same tension, 48. You know, you could argue that maybe you would go 48, 46 and drop the tension on the crosses. I think some people like to think because the crosses are shorter, then you would potentially tension them lower. But I've just retained it the same to see how it plays. So I've kind of done this before. I played another poly hybrid I played with for a little bit was the Signum Pro Hyperion and the Signum Pro Tornado, and I switched those around. And I think conventional wisdom says that whichever string is in the mains, that's where you're going to get most of the characteristic from. That's what you're going to feel the most. So if you've got a powerful string in the mains, then you should have power, and then, you know, your cross is just introducing like a secondary element. So it's going to be interesting. So what would I expect this to do? Well, I kind of commented when I had the Head Lynx Tour Champagne in the mains and the Head Hawk Power in the crosses, I did get spin, but it did lessen that spin. It felt like I had spin available when I wanted it, but it kind of started to seem to suit more hitting a bit flatter and just saying hit flatter with more power, but when I want spin, it's definitely there for me. I'm not having to work too hard for it. So then from this, what might I expect by putting the power in the mains is I would expect potentially that sense of, I would expect the spin factor to probably go down again, potentially. I mean, spin doesn't just come from the shaped string, it also comes from snapback, you know? So if you've got a round string traveling across the shaped string, then you should still have access to spin, just whether this tension setup allows it to move enough. What would I also expect? I would expect the launch angle potentially to go down again. So with this, I might potentially find, and this is what I'll see when I go hitting, that I start hitting maybe I'll start hitting the net, or I'm having to work to get it over. I don't know, let's go and see. I did hit some serves with this yesterday, and interestingly, it really opened up to me to kind of say, I can put more into this. So I've been doing platform stance for about probably almost the last year. And then in the last sort of 3 weeks, I decided to shift to back to pinpoint, just because, you know, you really do get easy access to, you know, shifting your body weight in. You can really sort of bring your legs in a lot more, sort of get down, bend your legs, and then jump up and get into the ball or power up into the ball. And definitely yesterday I was really focusing on that, sort of taking a bigger step, coming into the pinpoint, really sort of driving up with the legs. And this certainly I felt I was able to really get some power on the serve with this. Although then I did hit some second serves, some kickers, and it certainly seemed to give that to me. I do wonder though, one thing I did suffer with a more powerful string when I'm hitting a kick serve is the reliability went down, just because it's putting a bit too much into it. And it felt like I really had to focus to kind of bring it in. Whereas with, let's say, the Lynx Tour Champagne in a main, a full bed, it was like, if I stand up and I look up and I aim and go for sort of 7-2, throwing it up and then whipping over the top, it's going in. It's like almost guaranteed, which I really appreciate that. So bottom line, I guess the big question for me is, what does it do to my playing style? What does it do to particularly the launch angle? What does it do in terms of, does it still give me access to spin, particularly when I do use that a lot more on my single-handed backhand? And does it start to draw me into a style of play where, whether I like it or not, whether people kind of think that you should be able to exert some self-control, the simple fact for me is naturally I will err on the side of hitting through the ball hard. It's just, I can't help myself. So what I need is, frankly, a racket and a string set to bring in some of the control for the self-control that I lack, and which, I'm 46. An old dog can still learn new tricks, but it's very likely that this old dog isn't going to. So I'm going to be interested to try this and see where it goes, and whether I kind of look at and go, just because I like it, maybe it's not the best thing to do. Just because there's a cake on the side, it doesn't mean I should eat it all. Sometimes you just take a slice, or you say, I'm not going to take any. So I think this is actually, what this is doing is kind of really telling me what not my playing style is based on what I desire, but what I need to be able to achieve the goals that I'm setting for myself. It's getting very sort of deep and philosophical in some ways, but you know what, maybe that's the joy of this journey of tennis. So anyway, I'm going to get this on court, and yeah, let's see how it goes. I'm kind of looking forward to this. All right, how did that go? Well, I was obviously on the ball machine there, frankly, because this week has just been horrendous. The wind and the rain is driving me crazy. So I was just like, I hit with this for about probably half an hour before the day before going on the ball machine, and I did hit with it this evening in my hitting squad, which I'll talk about. But before that, I was just like, I've got to get on court, you know. And at the moment I can't really set the camera up in the squads, so it's a little bit repetitive. Of course, it's a ball machine, but it gives you you can kind of see, and what I'll talk about, you probably see some of these things. That aside, I'll tell you what, and this does link into this string, is I'm realizing that there's stuff that I've heard of words before, and I'll talk about which words in a second, but I clearly don't know what they mean. But I look at what I've done, for example, on the backhand, and I actually realized that all this time I've been like fumbling my way through, and I've actually got somewhere. I look at it and go, I can see now why that works, and it's some specific concepts. And the reason why I talk about that is I'm still really struggling on my forehand. And actually in that video, you can kind of see, I can see now, there are two different things going on. And it does link into this string. Why? Because this string setup, as I kind of might have predicted with the head hawk power in the mains and the Lynx Tour and the crosses, this is a power setup. It is not a spin setup. It is a flat hitting, hard hitting, powerful setup where frankly, the hawk power is just bringing power in the spades, and it really rewards you for hitting flat. And I would say all the Lynx Tour is doing is just reining that in a bit. It's just bringing a bit of control, a bit of stiffness to it. There's really no spin. It's nice, but, and I will talk about this more, it's not for me at the moment. Why? Because I think to use this setup, someone commented that, you know, there are pros out there that use natural gut with a poly and cross at probably lower tensions than you might expect, let's say, for natural gut. Basically, pros can string lower potentially because they just have such great technique. Now, what am I going on about here? I actually got kind of a bit, I don't know, because of the weather, it's driving me nuts. I mean, even when I was hitting the serves and then it had started to rain, those particular courts are actually quite sheltered. They're down in sort of a hollow, if you like. And the wind today was probably, I think we looked at it was 15 miles an hour with gusts going up to about 24 miles an hour. But actually there it's relatively sheltered enough that I could go on the ball machine. Now, the ball machine's set up, and this is the trouble with ball machines, it's set up so that I can stand back. I'm standing probably, a meter, 2 meters back behind the baseline. The ball's coming along, and it allows me to step in on the ball and attack it. Frankly, that's quite an easy ball to hit. You're not being put under pressure, nor is your technique. Now, where am I going with this? When I sort of mentioned about I just realized there's just stuff, quite basic things that I don't actually really know, you know? And I'm quite happy to admit that, you know, there's basic stuff which probably a lot of people go, you know, a lot of good players will go, well, yeah, that's quite basic. What am I talking about? There's two words. And I've kind of realized, so tonight in the squad, I was really spending a lot of time and I've been trying to work out how to take the racket back. You know, I mean, after all these years, I'm still working on that, right? And I'm going back and I'm sort of, you know, getting the racket, sort of trying to get more 90 degrees instead of sort of having it in front, trying to have it a bit more sort of upright, trying to sort of take it back. But I realized I'm there sort of going with different, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's more this abstract idea of what I'm intending to do to the ball rather than this sort of understanding of the mechanics. And there are two words which I realize I've heard before. One very much so, and I'll just tell you them. It's supination and pronation. Now, pronation probably lots of people have heard about because you do it on the serve. But for me, that's always just been this idea almost like of the, you know, snapping the wrist or, you know, the racket sort of turning through that sort of motion. I don't actually know what that word means. And likewise, then you get supination, which again, I've sort of heard before, and it's supination of the wrist. And you kind of go, well, yeah, I've heard that. And it's like, but if you said to me, what does it mean? I'd be like, I literally went tonight, I have no idea. Couldn't tell you. So I looked it up, and in looking it up, and then going through and basically understanding how supination and pronation, particularly on the forehand and backhand, are, I'd kind of argue, probably the fundamental things in terms of how to swing a racket. You suddenly realize that all the mucking around with the take back, do I have it here or there or here or there? It's like you take the racket back in order so that you can firstly supinate the wrist, which is basically you're kind of rotating, you're not actually moving the wrist, you're kind of rotating the forearm back, which allows the racket to drop back and the butt faces the court, right? And then that's where your racket lag. And the pronation is where then you're rotating the forehand and the wrist back through as you hit. So the supination, pronation. And I'm not doing that. Why? Because when I take the racket back, I tend to have the racket strings facing forwards, which now I watch some YouTube videos is basically, yeah, you can do that. And I think I do it on some of the attacking balls where you've got time then to sort of wind up and do this quite complex motion to sort of rotate the wrist round and get into that supinated position. But when you're under pressure, you never get there. And that's why I sort of get to here and then hook the ball. I know, but then I was watching, and I know I'm rambling a bit, but this does relate back to these strings, and I will say why. I was watching Rune on his forehand where he sort of comes round and his strings go out and he creates this natural loop that goes into the supination and then he pronates. And you suddenly go, it's not about saying just turn the strings outwards. The reason you do it is because it's just a really easy way, it appears, to allow your wrist to supinate. And then when you're hitting through, I can come round and pronate. And then you're going to get racket head speed, you're going to get racket lag and so on. And I realise now looking at my single-handed backhand, this is what I've stumbled across, which on the backhand, it's the reverse. You pronate, so you basically rotate the wrist and the forearm in, and then as you hit, you supinate. And that allows you to brush up and create topspin. And that's where actually, I've spent so much time on my backhand and I feel pretty solid on my backhand. Tonight in the session, if you hit my backhand, I'm not going to drive it so much, but I will be able to solidly get it back and put it back on the baseline. But my forehand, I just have no consistency because I don't understand or figure those concepts. Now, where does this relate back to these strings? Because this is a string review, not a review of how, despite after all these years I've been playing this game, still can't hit a forehand. Where it relates back to these are, I'm not ready for this, I actually quite liked it because, as you can see with some of the balls, you can just rip through it like crazy. But I just look at that and go, these strings, they do tend to reward you for hitting flatter and harder because there was really no spin on it. On my single-handed backhand, where normally, let's say with Lynx Tour as a full bed, I would be seeing the ball doing that. On the backhand, it was just driving through, which is fun. But funny enough, there are, I think, a couple walking a dog that come in the video, and it sounds terrible. There's a part of your ego that kind of goes, yeah, look at me, how hard I'm hitting the ball. And it's like, and then fortunately I went to the hitting session tonight with these, these kids who are really good. And I just felt like an idiot because I'm like, I can't do that. I can't step in and smash through the ball if I don't even know how to get a consistent forehand going on because I don't understand the biomechanics. And I'm quite happy to have that sort of humbling and being able to feel stupid. In part, on one hand, it's depressing, but then when you actually sort of then use that to drive you on and kind of say, I've got to look up some more sort of actual fundamentals, not someone saying you should do it like this, but to actually go, I can understand now the mechanics of that. I can understand now why that would work. So that now I can go away and sort of drill that in. And not just say, oh, I'm going to practice turning the strings out, but turning the strings out so I can supinate and then come on and pronate. And I already know it's going to work, because when I do it, it works and it feels natural, because you kind of let the racket go through. And I saw someone else talking about, making, instead of doing the windscreen wiper, it's like a rainbow where it's more from the shoulder, and I know that will happen. So let's get back to the strings. I liked it. That said, I feel like, the head hawk power didn't need to be the head hawk power. In actual fact, you could kind of argue and say, if I can really get that technique down where I can rip through the ball even when I'm under pressure and hit it really hard and get it consistent in the court where I want it to go, I don't know that I would get head hawk power, because why wouldn't I just stick in a multi-filament? Or, I think there are going to be plenty of strings out there that will probably do a better job than head hawk power. So bottom line for me with this setup, it worked. And I think if you like Head Lynx Tour, and if you want to stay within the head family, then the head hawk power, it works. If you're a hard hitter that doesn't require much spin, you've got probably quite advanced technique, so you can confidently sort of get your head down and rip through the ball, and you can sort of know that the Lynx Tour brings in a bit of control and a bit of spin. I think, that can work, but do I think you need I think the Lynx Tour is a great string, and I think it's a great control control string with great feel. But frankly, I think you could put anything in the mains that's got some good power in it. A nice round slick poly with some power in it, and I don't think it needs to be this string. So not a bad setup. It's the sort of setup I could see me going to maybe next year, maybe next year, where I've really grooved in and played lots of matches and kind of got all those fundamentals down. One thing I didn't like about it is the kick serve. It just had no kick. So all the spin of the Lynx Tour is gone, as far as I'm concerned. Which is, if I look at it, where's the packet? Yeah, so it's power and touch, and spin is literally the smallest words on the little head diagram there. This just killed any sense of spin, which for me, given I'm more going to sort of err towards this slice and the kick serve, I need something different, to be frank. In fact, that's where I think the next thing I'm going to be trying is the head hawk touch rough, because that is spin and touch, which if I combine that with the comfort, feel, spin and power of the Lynx Tour, I think that could be quite a nice setup. So bottom line, let's finish there, because the Head Hawk Power 48 pounds, 17 gauge, with the Head Lynx Tour 17 gauge at also 48 pounds, it is a nice setup if you like hitting hard and relatively flat, and maybe you just want a bit of control in there. But I think all this actually really proves is power string in the mains with Head Lynx Tour in the crosses equals, I think you do get a bit of comfort and feel and control, and you rein in that power a bit. I'm just not convinced that the Head Hawk power really is necessary. I think it's just another power string that you could switch out for something else and probably get a similar result. So that's it. That's all I've got to say.